Hi there, everyone. Mr. Terrar here with your e-learning lesson for April the 15th. Today, we're going to be continuing our discussion on tractor selection and the different components that we take into consideration when we are choosing the type of tractor to purchase, or even the type of tractor to, do a certain job with. And yesterday, we pretty much talked about the different types of tractors and the differences between a four-wheel drive tractor, a row crop tractor, and a utility tractor. We talked about the various components of a tractor, the owner's manual being the most important part of a tractor, the engine, and then finally the powertrain, the different components of the powertrain and the function of the clutch, the differential, the transmission, and all of those things. So we left off talking about how we measure agricultural power and how do we measure the power of a tractor. Now, obviously, horsepower is the unit that we use, but you might be surprised to know that we actually measure the amount of horsepower that a tractor has at a few different points of that tractor. It's different than a car or a truck. We could look at a sports car and say, "Wow, that car has 500 horsepower," and that's just simply the ability of that car to generate 500 horsepower in terms of straight line speed. That's how we're evaluating the power of that car. Well, with tractors, obviously, speed isn't what we're concerned with. We're talking about other types of power, and there's other types of power that we're considering. So the three types of agricultural power are drawbar power, power takeoff power, and brake power. And today we're going to talk about all three of those in more detail. Oops. The first is drawbar power. And drawbar power is the power produced by using the tractor drawbar to pull a load. So it's simply the amount of power that a tractor has to pull or push something. Most of the time, pull is what we're talking about. So, if we're talking about pulling a tillage implement or something like that, then drawbar power is what we're concerned with. Okay, so different machinery has different horsepower requirements. For a particular um, you know, for a particular tiller, they might know that in order to pull this tiller effectively, you're going to need a tractor that has at least 300 horsepower on the drawbar. Okay, and you have to make sure that your tractor can fulfill that before you purchase that implement. So drawbar power simply refers to a tractor's towing or pulling ability. The next type of power is power takeoff or brake power. Okay, power takeoff and braking power. So PTO or power takeoff is measured at the power takeoff shaft, and the power takeoff shaft is going to be located at the back of every tractor. There's a small shaft that sticks out, and ultimately the power takeoff shaft is an attachment to the powertrain of the machine. Obviously, when we think about how we take that uh, power generated in the engine and translate it to the ground, we think about, okay, the power going through a transmission and going through different gearing and turning the wheels of the tractor. Well, another way in which we utilize that power is the turning of the power takeoff shaft. And the idea of the power takeoff shaft is that it's used for driving auxiliary equipment. So, for example, if we have a piece of farm equipment that doesn't only need pulled through a field, it needs to be powered by something like a feed mixer or an auger, or could be a manure spreader, an auger cart. It needs some sort of extra power to either turn a shaft or to work a grinder, something more than just being pulled across the field. That's where our power takeoff shaft comes into play. Those implements that require PTO power will have a round shaft located at the front of that implement where it hitches to the drawbar, and you take that shaft and you attach it to the power takeoff shaft of the tractor. The power takeoff shaft of the tractor rotates, and that allows the engine power of the tractor to power whatever system in that farm implement to let it do what it needs to do. Okay? The standard rotating speed of a power takeoff shaft is between 540 and 1,000 RPM. Okay? So the power takeoff shaft, to measure power takeoff horsepower, we take a measurement on that right there at the power takeoff shaft. And once again, you know, uh, PTO driven equipment will have a certain horsepower requirement It'll say, you need a certain amount of horsepower at the PTO shaft in order to generate enough power to move this piece of equipment. So let's talk about the role of tires. Obviously, the wheels are what connect the tractor to the ground, but those tires can have a major impact on the efficiency of that power. And if we don't have the right type of tire, if we don't have the tires inflated to the right pressure, that can be really, really detrimental to our efficiency, and it can really limit that tractor's full potential. So careful management of tire inflation pressure and ballast can maximize our traction efficiency. It can help minimize compaction. It can increase the actual drivetrain or the life of the engine and transmission, and it can increase profitability margins. So using the right tire and having that tire inflated to the right degree, to the right PSI, is really, really important. Let's talk a little bit about traction efficiency. The portion of power accessible to the axle that is delivered to an implement through the drawbar. Okay, that's your traction efficiency. Power is conveyed most efficiently through surfaces that do not distort under pressure and where traction is great enough to prevent wheels from slipping. It's kind of like, I'm sure some of you guys like to take your truck out through the mud, right? Or your four wheeler out through the mud. Where does a four wheeler or where does a truck get the most efficient movement? Is it on smooth, hard packed, dry ground, or is it in mud that's up to your knees? Well, it's obviously on that smooth ground. Okay, when that truck or four wheeler is moving across that smooth, level, compacted ground that's dry, there's no wheel spin at all. Okay, that truck or four wheeler gets 100% efficiency out of every rotation of the tire. But when you take that same truck or same four wheeler and put it in a mud pit that you've got 18 inches of mud, those wheels are spinning, right? And for every spin of that wheel, you're maybe only advancing a few inches where you could be moving several feet. That's what we're talking about with traction efficiency. Now, well, I shouldn't say never because there have been years where it feels like we're farming in a mud bog, but normally under normal circumstances we're not driving tractors through that degree of mud. But there are other things that can impact traction efficiency. Okay, so we get the best traction efficiency through surfaces that do not distort or do not move under pressure. They're hard surfaces that don't move when you drive over them. So traction efficiency is limited by rolling resistance and wheel slip. Okay, so that's going to maximize power. You can generate as much power in the engine as possible. You can convert that energy to power in the transmission as efficiently as possible. But if you're just spinning your wheels, okay, you're going to limit the amount of power that you're going to truly be able to generate. Let's talk about soil compaction because that's a major issue that farmers are aware of, and it's something that we try to avoid at all costs. It's the increase in bulk density and decrease in pore space of soil. Now, this isn't a soil science class. I'm not going to try to make it one, but just to give you some background information that I think will help you understand soil compaction. Soil, okay, a given section of soil should consist of roughly 45% or 45% mineral matter, okay, the actual quote unquote dirt, 5% organic matter, which is dead or decaying plants, 25% air, and 25% water. And those 25% air and 25% water percentages occupy a portion of the soil known as pore space, basically the air pockets located between each soil particle. And that pore space is extremely important because soil needs a certain amount of air and a certain amount of water to support plant life. And if we get rid of that pore space, we don't have a place for that air or water to occupy. And soil compaction reduces the amount of pore space that we have. It's kind of like if you have a piece of, Play-Doh, right? And you take that Play-Doh and you pull it out of the can there, and it's nice and workable. It's soft, and you can tell there's air pockets inside of that Play-Doh. Well, if you take that Play-Doh and you squish it between your hands and you continually apply pressure to it, okay, and you get it packed together just as tight as possible, is it still soft and malleable? No, it's hard as a rock, right? You've removed all that pore space, you've removed all those air pockets, and you've made it extremely dense. Well, when we do that to soil, we remove that soil's ability to absorb water, we remove that soil's ability to exchange gas with the atmosphere, and that is really detrimental to soil health. And one of the things that can cause soil compaction is heavy equipment driving over it. So trucks, combines, and grain carts. Knowing what we know about modern day farm equipment and the size of it, the size and scale of it, compaction is something that's more important to consider now than it was in the past. You weren't in terrible danger of uh, compacting your field when you were driving over it with your Farmall M and your 4-row planter, but with the size of equipment that we have now and the weight of that equipment, compaction is something that we have to consider. So how can we maximize tractor efficiency power management? Uh, do not max power, okay, the tractor drivetrain at low speeds. That's going to wear things out. Okay, so we always want to try to operate on as little power output as possible. Okay, we don't want to redline our tachometer and just run full throttle all the time. Okay, because that's not always helping our efficiency. It's just creating unneeded wear and tear on our drivetrain and our final drive. Combination of smaller implements pulled at faster speeds reduces the weight needed to achieve max tractive efficiency, which in turn minimizes the pressure applied to the soil surface, okay, and reduces compaction. So if we can use smaller implements pulled at a faster rate of speed, that's a good way to reduce compaction because we're decreasing the amount of time that we are coming into contact and compacting that soil. So basically what we're saying is from a compaction standpoint, a lot of times it makes sense to use a narrower implement and just travel at a faster rate of speed. Having the optimal amount of balance is a compromise between wheel slip and rolling resistance. So basically making sure that our tires are filled to the right pressure. Okay, that's going to help um, increase our efficiency. Sometimes people will use a liquid ballast. They'll actually put calcium chloride mixed with water inside the tires. That was a very common practice back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And the idea was that increased your ballast efficiency. Okay, let's go ahead and stop there for today. Tomorrow we are going to talk about weight distribution, okay, and what your distribution is depending on what type of tractor you're using and what type of implement that you're using, and then we'll get into uh, how we measure power in tractors. So you do have some questions to answer for your e-learning assignment. Make sure you get that done, and I will see you all on Friday. Let me know if I can help you in any way, and have a great day.